Shalom, everyone. This is Teddy Wilson of Seekers of Yahweh Ministries, and welcome to another Friday Night Live of Restoring the Hebrew Mind. This evening, we're going to be carrying on in our study of the whole book of Psalms, and this is going to be Psalms Session 6, and we're going to be going over chapter 10 in the book of Tehillim. Before we do that, we have a couple of other things we're going to be addressing. Also, when we're done with the whole Psalms session, I'm going to go back and remove all of the other small teachings that we had prior to the book of Psalms. I'm going to put that into a playlist so that everybody can have a playlist to go to specifically just for the book of Tehillim. I want to read this response that was sent in by Brother Jonathan out there in, I believe, North Carolina, concerning last week's teaching on dealing with sin. Jonathan said, I believe you're going to talk about what happens when we when we stop sinning before Father Yahweh and his heavenly hosts. I want to share my experiences on that. When I finally came to the grips with myself and told Father that I would stop being wicked, things changed that instant. The people that I had problems with, he gave away to deal with them, and he set a boundary of peace between us. Of course, there will always be people who will never come to peace with us because they are not on the same plateau in their lives. My opinion, when we get on our knees and lay prostrate and say, Father, I don't want to go back there, he will immediately open wide a smoother path for us to travel. Money no longer is a major concern. Neighbors are easier to deal with. Sleep is more satisfying. And time itself seems to move as quickly. The material things that used to excite me do not excite me anymore. And we develop more compassion and understanding towards the less fortunate, homeless, inmates, immigrants, refugees, hungry families, people with cancers, widowed people who just lost their spouses, and the list goes on. In other words, our hearts begin to focus more on the important things of life. Elon Musk, Richard Branson, and Jeff Bezos want to send people out in space to the moon, Mars, and elsewhere. They have yet to learn that our Father created the earth for mankind to live on, not the rest of our solar system. They will be very disappointed when they discover that such endeavors are vanity. Forgive me if I have passed judgment. In short, my life is better and more satisfying because every day I pray to Yahweh and tell him that I don't want to see my soul being destroyed at the great judgment, because I refuse to at least observe Sabbath, eat clean foods only, observe his holy Moedim, and not look back. It's a terrible thing to fall into the hands of an angry and disappointed Yahweh El Shaddai. And then he quotes Proverbs 16:7. When a man's ways please Yahweh, he makes even his enemies be at peace with him. Amen and amen. So I want to thank you, Brother Jonathan, for sending in that testimony about when you decided to quit breaking the commandments of Elohim. Definitely it does all of those things that you just described in your letter, and even more. There are so many things that being obedient to Yahweh's word does for us as believers. Like he said, the list goes on and on. So let's go ahead and pray in, and then we'll get first to the question that I'm going to be answering this week. Can you please explain from a Hebrew point of view what it means in 1 Thessalonians 5 about not rendering evil for evil? And when we go back into the research of these Hebrew words, the emphasis on this is profound. because we think do not render evil for evil. I mean, what does that English word mean? I mean, where does this English word evil even come from? Because we as believers shouldn't be evil to begin with. If you understand where I'm going with that, from a Hebrew perspective, the research of that word evil, and even looking at the word render in Greek, really sets a whole new tone to what the passage is speaking about. So let's go ahead and pray in, and then we'll go ahead and get started on that this evening. Heavenly Father, we praise you and we worship you this evening, and we thank you for your Shabbat, and we thank you for your mitzvot, your commandments. We thank you most of all for the blood that was shed. We thank you for our redemption, Yahshua. And we thank you so very much for the gift of life and the gift to live with you eternally in your kingdom. Oh, Father, find us worthy. Help us to search out the things that keep us unspotted from sin, and help us to understand your word in a way that makes it very easy for us to say, this is what Yahweh wants me to do. This is his will for my life and for all mankind. Help us to see the truth so that you can be glorified and your truth can be manifested in our lives. In the mighty name of Yahshua, we pray that you lead us and guide us this evening. Hallelujah and amen. Praise Yah. Oh. Somebody wants me to sound the shofar. Baruch atah Yahweh Eloheinu melech haolam. Blessed be Yahweh, King of the universe, who has sanctified us by his commands and redeemed us by the blood of his Son, Yahshua, and given us command to hear and respond to the call of the shofar. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. So, we're going to be getting started again this evening with answering the question out of 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Can you please explain from a Hebrew point of view what it means in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5 about not rendering evil for evil? And before we just attack this one verse, I think as we always practice here, let's go back and grab some context, and we'll be starting off by reading 1 Thessalonians chapter 5, verses 12 through 24. Then we're going to be getting into a Hebrew word study and also a Greek word study, and taking this back to the context of what the Torah teaches, and where this same word in the Greek was used also in the Greek Torah, in the Septuagint. And that would be in the book of Deuteronomy chapter 13. So let's go ahead and read 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. And again, we're going to be putting this verse that is in question into context and see that it brings a wonderful revelation when we do. First Thessalonians chapter 5. Well, we're gonna look at the context, because you could just go to that one verse, and again, we won't have a full understanding as to why it's being used there and what is actually being said. Because the specific verse is 15, but we're going to be beginning by reading 12 through 24. But brothers, we beg you to know those who labor among you and are over you in the master and admonish you, and to hold them in the highest regard in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves. And we appeal to you, brothers, warn those who are disorderly, encourage the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. Now, so here we're getting into some of the context that Shaul was speaking about before he got into verse 5. So here we see that admonishment is a good thing, and correcting those who are disorderly is also considered a good thing. Nowadays, if you go to admonish a brother or a sister, or you go to say, hey, that's disorderly conduct according to the Torah, they immediately start calling you all kinds of names. A legalist, oh, you're better than me, you know, those types of things. But absolutely, the body of Messiah is supposed to be exercising these types of things along with patience, love, etc. Again, in verse 14, we appeal to you, brothers, warn those who are disorderly, encourage the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all. See that no one renders, and we're going to be looking at that word in Greek, evil for evil, and that Greek word that they translated into evil is the same Greek word in both instances in that passage. See that no one renders evil for evil to anyone, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and for all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in all things give thanks, for this is the desire of Elohim in Messiah Yeshua for you. Do not quench the spirit. Please notice that what he says in verses 12 through 18, he's pleading with the people who will read this letter not to quench the spirit. So rendering evil for evil is one of those things. So we need to understand that. And we also need to find the root of this teaching, because the Spirit of Yahweh has shown us over and over throughout the Torah and the prophets what grieves his spirit. In other words, Shaul is teaching us something that has already been taught for millennia. Verse 19 again, do not quench the spirit, do not despise prophecies, prove them all, hold fast what is good, keep back from every form of wickedness, and the Elohim of peace himself set you completely apart. So again, this has something to do with being set apart, being made holy, sanctified, and set apart by Yah. Completely, in verse 23 again, and the Elohim of peace himself set you completely apart, and your entire spirit and being and body. See that? Spirit, body, and soul. Be preserved blameless at the coming of our Master Yeshua Messiah. He who calls you is trustworthy. He is faithful, who also shall do it. Now, what I want to do is I want to first take the context that we're reading here out of the Brit Hadashah and connect it to where Shaul's mind would have been whenever he penned this letter. Remember, let the same mind be in you. They were Hebrew-minded. They'd been reading the Hebrew Torah. And so it's those things that were on his mind whenever he wrote the letter. So let's validate the context of what we're reading in the New Testament by confirming some things here about quenching the spirit, do not despise prophecies, and proving them all. Hold fast to what is good and keep back from every form of wickedness. Then we'll go back and look at what this evil thing is. It's not this form of wickedness that we think we understand by the English word wicked or evil. As you're going to see, it's very, very concrete. And the point being made here is to anyone who may not be functioning by living according to what is written. So, connecting this to the Torah, let us all go to Deuteronomy chapter 13. Devarim chapter 13. And we'll be reading verses 1 through 5 there. And after reading verses 1 through 5, and we begin to conduct our word study, we're going to see that the polyglot takes the Greek word used in Thessalonians back to Genesis 19:19, which is Hebrew number 7451, which is the same Hebrew number as the word that we're about to read here in Deuteronomy. All right. Deuteronomy chapter 13. Verses 1 through 5. When there arises among you a prophet, remember, because it says, do not despise, right, prophecy, but prove them all. So this is exactly where Shaul's mind was. As a matter of fact, in this book that he writes to Thessalonica, and also in other books that he wrote to Titus and Timothy, he's warning of these heresies that would come in and be taught to the people who he taught the truth to. So please remember, at all times, not only is he bringing the good news, but he's also shedding light on what to look out for that should not be connected to the good news. And it's the same things that we were warned about. Guess where? Yes, in Deuteronomy and in the Torah and the prophets. Praise Yah. Devarim chapter 13, beginning at verse 1 once again. When there arises among you a prophet or a dreamer of dreams, and he shall give you a sign or a wonder, and the sign or the wonder shall come true, of which he has spoken to you, saying, let us go after other mighty ones, which you have not known, and serve them. Right away, I don't care what names they're using, what gospel they're preaching. Shaul is giving us warning. If they have you going after the names of other mighty ones, they were not sent by him. It's as simple as that. But watch what he says concerning this. I mean, how many of us would like to believe that we've came into the knowledge of the truth? Praise Yah. Well, once you come into that faith, that belief, guess what Yahweh is going to do? He's going to test it. For the testing of your faith builds patience, endurance, and all these things that he wants to make sure that his people have in their lives. Verse 3, do not listen to the words of that prophet or that dreamer of dreams, for Yahweh your Elohim is trying you to know whether you love Yahweh your Elohim with all of your heart and with all of your being. Walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him and guard his commands and obey his voice and serve him and cling to him. You see, so specifically he's saying, if there is somebody that's claiming to profess the good news or the word of Yahweh to you, and they are leading you to worship the names of other mighty ones, they haven't been sent by him. And also, if they're not teaching you to follow the commandments of Yahweh, then they're not of him as well. He says specifically, walk after Yahweh your Elohim and fear him and guard his commands and obey his voice and serve him and cling to him. So how do we serve Yah? Obeying his commands. Praise Yah. Verse 5 says, and that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is put to death. You see, those types of people cannot receive everlasting life. Why would that be? Because they're leading Yahweh's people astray by their own words and their own dreams and their own visions, something that Yahweh did not tell them to relate to his people. Yeah. We're having a big storm here, just so everybody knows. If we lose, if you lose us, it's because we're having a storm. We have thunder showers here. Praise Yah. Now, again in verse 5 it says, and that prophet or that dreamer of dreams is put to death, because he has spoken apostasy against Yahweh your Elohim, who brought you out of the land of Mitzrayim and redeemed you from the house of bondage, to make you stray from the way which Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to walk. Thus you shall purge the evil, there's our word. Thus you shall purge that evil from your midst. So this is the same exact Greek word in the Greek Torah that is used in Thessalonians, and we also see some very clear indications about prophecies, how we test those things, and how we prove those things. This is exactly where Shaul's mind was when he wrote the book of Thessalonians. Now, this word evil is Hebrew number 7451. It's going to be the Hebrew word ra. Now, in modern Hebrew, this word is spelt resh, ayin. But anciently, the ga or the gayan is used. And we're going to see the difference in that and how much more clearer the ancient Hebrew makes this word when we go back to the ancient Hebrew lexicon by Binner. First in the Strongs, it's again number 7451. We'll go ahead and read that real quick. 7451. It comes from 7489, which we're going to take a look at that. Bad, or as a noun, evil. Now, that is the extent 7451. What's that? Yeah, it comes from 7489. We're going to be looking at both of those so that we can see how this has changed over the years. Here again, the abstract definition in the Strong's just means bad, or as a noun, evil. That's the extent of what we get out of it, out of the Strong's. Now, looking at 7489, we see there that it is ra'ah. So that is the root. Ra'ah. To spoil, breaking to pieces, to make or be good for nothing, i.e., bad. To spoil, breaking to pieces, to make or be good for nothing. Now, again, we see a whole bunch of abstract words here. Going back to the ancient Hebrew lexicon, here we see 7451. It is ancient Hebrew lexicon number 1460AN. And you'll find that on page 269 of your lexicon. Now, so here's the ancient Hebrew. It's a noun in the masculine or feminine. And then, for some reason, not all the letters are showing up in my, right. So this is resh ayin is what is usually there. And if you look in your books, it's going to show you that it, in modern Hebrew, is resh ayin. Now, anciently, the ga or gayin was replaced exclusively with the ayin. And the ayin is the picture of an eye, and it can mean to see something or to gain knowledge or those types of things. But specifically the gayin is the picture of a rope. And this, remember, we'll go back to Thessalonians here in a moment and see how that kind of changes what's being said there. Okay? Now, so what this actually has to do with, you see that he has it bad, something dysfunctional. It's something dysfunctional. It's not evil or wicked. It's saying when somebody that is dysfunctional does something to you, you don't do something dysfunctional in return. What causes us to function properly in Yahweh's eyes? The judgments and the right ruling in the Torah. So what they're saying is, if somebody does something that is against the Torah to you, you do not repay them in a way that is not written in the Torah. The judgments of the Torah are already written for somebody who does sin against Yahweh and the body of Israel. So that's what it's speaking about here. When somebody does something against you that is dysfunctional towards the written word of Yah, you do not have the right to do something that is dysfunctional according to the Torah of Yah back to them. Because Yahweh says, vengeance is mine. I am Yahweh and I shall repay. So the way that we take care of those things is the dysfunctional person is brought into judgment, and we use the word to functionally correct the dysfunctional brother or sister. You see, so this is a very great question. What is the Hebrew meaning behind it? It is absolutely has nothing to do with evil or wickedness, those definitions that you're seeing in your English dictionaries. It's something dysfunctional. Now, I want to point something out so critical. Now look, up there at the action root, let me see if I can get this down a little bit so we can look at this further. Okay, now look at this. Bad, something dysfunctional, wrong, evil, or wicked. But it has something to do with the dysfunctional part of a person. And this letter was written to people who had come to the knowledge of the truth. And the truth is in the Torah. And our correction for breaking the Torah is written in the law and the prophets. And it was carried on, as we're going to see here, in the Brit Hadashah. That's his whole point. something dysfunctional. Now, we see here at the top of the root line, 1460, we see resh gayan, and the action root is to grieve. So what it's saying is when somebody grieves you that's being dysfunctional, where does grieving take place? You get emotional, it's in your mind, right? Look at this. Here's the proof of that. This resh has something to do with the head of man. And in the head of man is our mind, our thoughts. And the gayan is the picture of a rope, and it means to twist. Right? So when somebody grieves you and causes you to have twisted thoughts, that is grieving. When somebody causes your mind to have twisted thoughts, things that are not righteous and holy and just, you don't have the right to do that back to them. What we do is go to the word of Yah, and we use it to functionally correct the dysfunctional brethren. Now, this is going to make a whole lot more sense. This is where Shaul's mind was. Now let's go back and read that passage in Thessalonians over again. Praise Yah. Now remember, those who you brought to judgment, when you brought them to judgment, you brought them before the headship, right? Because they were to be accused. So you had people who were rightly ruling over Israel, and they were to be respected. That's the whole point here. Verse 12 in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. But brothers, we beg you to know those who labor among you and are over you in the master and admonish you, and to hold them in the highest regard in love because of their work. Be at peace among yourselves. And we appeal to you, brothers, warn those who are what? There it is. See, if we let someone continue in disorderly actions, the penalty for that brother or sister keeps getting deeper, deeper, and deeper, and harder and harder and harder. It is our obligation to try to correct disobedience or dysfunctionalism in the body. Now, we can suggest it and point it out, but we cannot make them do it. So if they continue in this dysfunctionalism, Yahweh will take that and he will deal with those people. Warn those who are disorderly, encourage the faint-hearted, uphold the weak, be patient with all, and see that no one renders evil for evil to anyone, but always pursue what is good, both for yourselves and for all. Rejoice always, pray without ceasing, in all things give thanks, for this is the desire of Elohim in Messiah for you. Do not quench the spirit. Do not despise prophecies, prove them all, hold fast to what is good, and keep back from every form of wickedness. Great question. Now, we do not render dysfunctional actions to people who have approached us with this dysfunctionalism. So we want to look at the Greek here to get a better idea about rendering. Do not render evil for evil. That word render is Greek number 591. We'll be looking that up in the Strongs. Greek number 591. It says it comes from 575 and 1325, which means it's a compound word. It means to give away, to give up, give over, or give back. You see this? So we cannot give back dysfunctionalism for dysfunctionalism. It's very clear. The only thing that we can give back to dysfunctional brethren is what the word says for us to give them. Anybody who says, well, you know what, I had a dream, and I think it was about you, and Yahweh told me to tell you this, you better back up immediately and say, wait, well, if this person that is saying that, right, if they're going to step up and say that they had a word from Yahweh or a dream, for them to be instructed to do something that is outside of the instructions of Torah for any given case, they are a false prophet and they are a false dreamer, and Yahweh says that they will die. This is, you remember in the church how we always had those, especially in the faith that I was in Christianity. I mean, we were sending people to hell for anything. And we told them it was coming straight from JC. To walk in the truth is a delight. To get caught up in the legalities of the truth is not. So the men that are helping you in your walk must admonish with patience. That means just set it out there and pray about it, and Yahweh will either touch that person or group of people and cause them to see the error of their way or whatever it may be, or they will not. But it won't be on you. Remember what Yahweh told Ezekiel, if you don't tell them, their blood is on your head. We don't want that. So first of all, we have to clear our consciousness between us and Yahweh and try to find a group of people that is actually teaching the word to be used in all the things that are dysfunctional. We've translated that into evil. You'll never get it. It's just not there in the English. Evil and wickedness from a Hebrew perspective means something that is dysfunctional. Look around. I mean, look around even in the body of people that you fellowship with. There are people that refuse to stand up to their bosses or something about working on the Shabbat or whatever it may be. We don't have to have patience with the dysfunctionalism. We have to have patience with Yahweh to reveal the truth to them once we do bring the functional activities and present them to that brother or sister. The whole book is a penal code section. It's a judiciary act by words because of sin from the garden on, and how he's going to fix that. I like the fixing part a lot more than getting caught up in the legalities of it all, don't you? I mean, and it's pretty simple to do. Don't eat this. Don't touch that. Gather on my set apart times and just do what I say. What's wrong with that? Nothing. And it's pretty darn easy. Like the brother said in this letter that I just read before we got started this evening. Once he started doing that, Yahweh took all of those things that were a struggle and removed them and caused peace in his life. That was a response to last week's teaching about how we deal with sin. Specific testimony saying, when I chose to address sin in my life got a lot better. Praise Yah. Now, so those are the types of people that Yahweh was speaking about through Shaul, was dysfunctional people. We get a total different definition from evil or wicked. Now, I don't know about you, but I want to be functional, because this is talking about, not quenching the spirit, having our desire of Elohim be fulfilled in Messiah. So the desire of Elohim is already outlined in the Word, and it's in Messiah. Verse 18, in all things give thanks, for this is the desire of Elohim in Messiah Yahshua. For who? For all of you in the body of Yahshua. Boy, the study of this language is awesome. The study of this language is clarifying, and the study of this language makes what Yahweh asks of us very clear and easy to understand. Now, we're going to be getting into Psalms chapter 10. We'll read a little Hebrew history on that chapter, and then we'll be getting started dissecting the whole passage there. There are a couple of spots in the passage. So the history on the passage here says, in all likelihood, Psalms chapter 10 forms a unity with Psalms chapter 9. This conclusion is based upon a number of considerations. First, the acrostic in Psalms 9, which we discussed last time we taught on Psalms. Acrostic meaning the passages in there begin with specific letters all the way through the alphabet. So, it is in line with the acrostic in Psalms 9. It goes only to the letter Lamed, halfway through the alphabet. And while the acrostic in Psalm 10 is not perfect, the psalm does end with the 4 final letters of the alphabet. Thus, verse 12 begins with Kaf, verse 14 with Resh, verse 15 with Shin, verse 17 with Ta. Furthermore, this psalm has no heading of its own in the Hebrew. Whereas every psalm in book 1 except Psalm 1, 2, and Psalm 33 has a separate heading. Finally, the language of Psalm 10 resembles closely the language of Psalm 9. The phrase in times of trouble and an unusual phrase in chapter 10, verse 1 is also found in 9:10. Both psalms end with the thought that Elohim will protect the humble by teaching the wicked that they are only mortal and cannot prevail against Elohim's infinite justice. Again, from a Hebrew perspective, these Hebrew-minded people know that they've been caught up in a judicial system that Yahweh implemented because of sin. You're going to see it everywhere. The reason why that even Jewish people today want to keep the mitzvot, albeit they're also keeping all of these other things that they've added, is because they know that there is a legal system and Yahweh is going to execute judgment at some point. That's what the legal system is there for, to pronounce you either guilty or not guilty. The only way that we can be pronounced not guilty of sin is by the death, burial, resurrection, and the shedding of the blood of Yahweh's redemption. So what do we do after that? Shall we continue in sin? No. Now, we'll come back to a little bit of that momentarily. But we're going to begin by reading Psalms 10, verses 1 through 4. Psalms chapter 10, verses 1 through 4. Why do you stand off, O Yahweh, hiding in times of distress? In arrogance, the wrongdoer hotly pursues the poor. They are caught by the schemes which they devise. For the wrongdoer, many of you are seeing wicked there, boasts of his cravings. And the greedy, many of you are seeing covetous one, cursed and despised Yahweh. Uh-oh. We need to figure this one out, because it's talking about despising Yahweh. So we need to take a real close look at who these wrongdoer and greedy people are. In the pride of his face, the wrongdoer does not seek him. In all of his thoughts, there is no Elohim. What did we just read in the Hebrew history behind this passage? That last verse is the key to understanding what type of people the scripture is actually addressing. All right? Now, what we need to figure out here and study is who or what is defined in the Hebrew text as wrongdoers or wicked people, or greedy or covetous people, because those are the ones that Scripture says are despising Yahweh. Very important that we understand that. So, wicked is Hebrew number 7563. Strong's Hebrew number 7563. It's going to be the Hebrew word rasha. Rasha. We're going to be reading that from the Strong's. Then I'm going to be taking us to the ancient Hebrew on that as well. Strong's Hebrew 7563. Rasha. Listen to this. From 7561, meaning morally wrong. Again, dysfunctional. See, it has to do with the thoughts and intents of someone's mind. Morally wrong, concretely and actively bad person. So bad here is somebody who is, in Yahweh's view, morally incorrect. That means that his Torah has not penetrated the heart and the mind of that individual. And we have translated that in most English versions as wicked. It simply has to do with somebody who is, I will add this, ethically and morally incorrect. That changes the whole passage. Exactly. Somebody that does not have the law written on their hearts is not, great question, is not morally obligated to fulfill their role in Yahweh's wishes. How do we know that? Because in the New Testament, it specifically says that these types of wrongdoers and the carnal mind is not subject to the law of Elohim, nor can it be, because it is fleshly, carnal minded. See, the same exact definitions are found in there if you just understand the mind and the morals and the obligation of each individual to fulfill that in what Yahweh calls good or calls bad. What we think is good or bad doesn't matter. Some people are in trouble right here with the king for despising the name of Yahweh, and it just simply means people who are not morally laced with Yahweh's commandments. It comes from 7561. That's Rashi, a primary root, to be, cause, or declare wrong. By implication, to disturb or violate. So the moral that is being spoken about here, the morality that is not there, is in violation of something, which would be, I'll give you one guess, Yahweh's word, Yahweh's Torah. Now, in the ancient Hebrew lexicon, it's number 2799 in. And you'll find that on page 449. If you're following along electronically, it's going to be on 450, page 450. Again, that's 2799 in. These same definitions echo over and over and over throughout Yahweh's word. But the context shifts the intention of the modern English reader to definitions that are really not outlined in the original spoken word. Do you understand how dangerous it is? There are people out there who are trying to serve him, who are despising his name, by the deception of the church doctrines and the deception of these translators. Because now we know, let's say for instance, that the first English translators really didn't know, but nowadays, I'm an ex-convict. We're just common people here. And if we can see this, you know definitely that the scholastic world knows it. And they continue to let these errors be reprinted and gave out, sometimes for free, to the masses of people that are really trying to serve Yahweh. What a shame. Despising Yahweh. So Rasha, here we see I must have moved a little bit too far. 27.99. There we go. All right. Oops. Okay. So now, again, look at what it begins with. It begins with the resh. It's got something to do with the mind, the head of man. Resha. Resh, shin, ayin. Wicked, one who has departed from the correct path or way. That's who's being spoken about in that passage. People who are not walking on the path that Yahweh wants us to walk on. That kind of takes and amplifies the groups of people that are committing that against Yahweh right now. It says that they are despising Yahweh by doing that. Wickedness. Wickedness in the eyes of Yahweh is one who has departed from the correct path or way. What he originally instituted into the mind of man, pressing us towards that knowledge. For he wants us to grow in divine wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. And so the people that are being spoken about here are the people who their minds have strayed, and it's not allowing them to be pressed towards Yahweh's knowledge. As a matter of fact, they're being pressed towards false knowledge, gaining false precepts to Yahweh's divine word. Now, it also says that the covetous one, or the greedy one, right, is despising Yahweh. And we need to get a better understanding of that as well, because we don't want to defy Yahweh. We don't want to do that. We want to grow closer to him. You know, we don't want to despise him even in ignorance. We want to please him. And this language and these ancient Hebrew definitions are the way to set our foot in the right direction on the same path that he showed us from the very beginning. Now, so covetous or greedy is Hebrew number 1214. It's going to be the Hebrew word bazah. Bazah. And I'll read that out of the Strong's first. Hebrew number 1214. Bazah, it's a primary root, to break off, plunder, to finish, or stop. Now, many of you might say, well, what does breaking off and stopping have to do with greed or being covetous? Well, as we're going to see, if you stop something from its course in nature, or its course in which Yahweh has set it on, and you've taken it for yourself and removed it from its place, bringing an end to it as it was known, it was done out of what we would translate into greed. And it has to do with what? Coveting. You look at something and you say, I'm going to have that. That's coveting. That is coveting. Now, in the ancient Hebrew lexicon, it's number 2031V on page 307. Again, that's number 2031V. (2031V). Batsah. Look at this. Bet Zod Ayin. Very important. Now look at the definition there. To cut something off to destroy it. Second definition there is profit. To take something by force or greed. So what is actually being spoken of here is that you are despising Yahweh if you greedily, covetously take something out of its house, something off of its path or course in life that Yahweh instilled in it. The reason and the knowledge that Yahweh created something and its path or course in life, when you remove something for your own gain and your own purpose that you did not need, and it alters the course or path in that person or that thing's life, you have despised Yah. I stand before you guilty today. I've done those things in my life. To cut off or take something from its home, to remove it from its path or course because of your eye being on it. Your eye causes you to covet. When you put your eyes on something and want to change its course or its path in life, that's exactly what happened in the garden. Hava coveted that tree. Yahweh said, you will have no other mighty ones before me. And before you break any other commandment, you're going to break that one. Because he gave us the rest. So what happened, let's add a little bit more emphasis to that. Whenever the evil one looked down here and saw us and what Yahweh gave us, it wanted it, didn't it? So it came down here and found a way to pull us out of our house in which Yahweh gave us or made us overseers over, took us off of our path, and it's because he looked down upon us and coveted us. It was full of greed and envy and strife. And iniquity was found in that being. Now, all of those bad qualities are a part of man's nature, even from their youth. These are things we must overcome by the word of Yah. It's the only way to overcome evil and wickedness, dysfunctionalism. So those are the types of people that are being spoken of in the passage. How many times have we read in our English Bibles right over these passages and never knew the true definition of the words that Yahweh spoke through his messengers? We have all these things going on in our mind that are so westernized, Englishized, Grecianized, Latinized, that we really don't understand what Yahweh was expecting of us when he spoke through Moshe and the prophets and the apostles. Continuing in Psalms chapter 10, what we're going to do here is we're going to finish up by reading verses 12 through 18, and then we're going to connect what is written in Psalms 10, verses 12 through 18, to the Bible from the book of Proverbs all the way down to the New Testament or the Brit Hadashah. Chapter 10, beginning of verse 12. Arise, O Yahweh, O El, lift up your hand. Do not forget the lowly ones. Why do the wrong scorn Elohim? He has said in his heart, it is not required. You have seen it, for you observe trouble and grief to repay with your hand. The poor commits himself to you, and you are the helper of the fatherless. Break the arm of the wrong one and the evil one. See that? There's our words again. The ones who are dysfunctional and despise or are greedy, right? Who are not walking on the path that Yahweh has set before us. Break the arm of the wrong one and the evil one. Search out this wrongness that would not be found out. Yahweh is sovereign forever and ever. The nation shall perish from his land. Yahweh, you have heard the desire of the lowly ones. You prepare their what? Heart. There's the connection between Yahweh, what Yahweh wills, revealed to us in his word, and the ones who do not have this, are not walking the path, and they are walking disorderly to what has been written. You prepare their heart. You incline your ear to defend the fatherless and the downtrodden, so that man who is of the earth no longer oppresses. We're just going to cover a few of the corresponding verses here. Beginning in Proverbs chapter 3 and at verse 34. Proverbs 3 and at verse 34. He certainly scoffs the scoffers, but gives favor to the humble. The wise do inherit esteem, but fools are bearing away shame. Proverbs chapter 29. Verse 23 through 27. Proverbs 29. Through, we'll say 28. Excuse me, 27. The pride of man brings him low, but the humble in spirit obtains esteem. He who shares with a thief hates his own life. He hears an oath, but does not report. The fear of man brings a snare, but whoever trusts in Yahweh is set on high. Many seek the face of a ruler, but right ruling, there's judgment, for man comes from where? Yahweh. An unrighteous man is an abomination to the righteous, and he who is straight in the way is an abomination to the wrong. James chapter 4. James chapter 4. Beginning of verse 6. But he gives greater favor. Because this, he says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble. So then subject yourselves to Elohim, resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. Do you understand what we just said? So then subject yourselves to Elohim. Walk in the path and walk in order, not in disorder. Resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. Cleanse hands, sinners, and clean the hearts, you double-minded. We've seen throughout Scripture that the righteous and the unrighteous, the law-abiding citizen and the not law-abiding citizen, should not walk in unison. That's what the book of Proverbs is talking about. Why do I bring these up? Because consistently through Scripture, Yahweh is showing us that we are not supposed to walk with people who are disorderly to the Torah. Why? And despising Yahweh and his name. Why is that so important? Because Yahweh is going to give grace or favor to the humble, those who have submitted themselves to Yahweh and his word. And when you join yourself to these other types of people, you know what happens? We're despising the name of Yah. What union has the righteous with the unrighteous? Come out from among them and be ye separate, saith Yahweh. Touch not the... Oh, wait a minute. Let's read this again. Verse 6. But he gives greater grace or favor because of this, he says, Elohim resists the proud, but gives favor to the humble, those who have submitted to him. So then subject yourselves to Elohim. See there? Resist the devil, and he shall flee from you. Draw near to Elohim, and he shall draw near to you. Cleanse your hands, sinners, and clean your hearts, you double-minded. Look at verse 10. Humble yourselves in the sight of the master, and he shall lift you up. Now, Matthew chapter 23. Let's get the words of the Messiah here. Matthew chapter 23 and at verse 12. Same principles that we were just reading about, and the same picture we get from the definitions that we've seen on the board this evening right here in your English Bible, penned by the apostles and spoken now by Yahshua himself. Matthew 23 and at verse 12. And whoever exalts himself shall be humbled, and whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. Now let's see what Yahweh or what Yahshua was speaking about here. Look at this. Go over to verse 23. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees, you hypocrites, because you tithe the mint and the anise and the cumin and have neglected the weightier. Many people misquote this passage all the time. They say, well, I want to follow the weightier matters of the law. Matters is added. Get rid of it. It's not even there. Specifically, it says, and have neglected the weightier of the Torah. And in reading this in Hebrew, it specifically is saying the weight of Torah. Now back up and see what he's saying over here. We're going to finish that passage in verse 12. Whoever exalts himself, the Pharisees were exalting their words above the words of Yah. And he says, woe to you who do that. So those of you who say, just like the Pharisees did, I don't have to do everything that Yahweh said in his commandments, and I'm still going to the kingdom. Yahshua said, unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you shall in no wise enter the kingdom of Elohim. Whoever exalts himself, to exalt yourself is to pull yourself away from what Yahweh said and think that you're still going to live. When it speaks about the proud people, that's who it's speaking about as well, many times. It's a proud thing to think that you don't have to do what Yahweh said to do when Yahshua said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that is proceeded out of the mouth of my Father. You are walking in pride and arrogance if you think that you can say and think that you're going to go into the inheritance not keeping the commandments of Elohim or adding faith and grace dispensationalism to them, just like the scribes and Pharisees added the oral traditions to them. But whoever humbles himself shall be exalted. To humble oneself apparently has something to do with the weight of Torah. Yahshua said, my yoke is easy, didn't he? He was the Torah. The weight of the Torah is not heavy. Excuse me. It's not burdensome. They've neglected the weight of the Torah, the right ruling, and the compassion, and the belief. It's not the weightier matters in it, and it's not saying that judgment and compassion and belief or faith are the weightier things of it. No, it's saying that is Torah. Judgment, compassion, and faith. Belief. You cannot walk in compassion towards Yahweh or his people outside of the rules of Torah, which has been the whole subject of what we've seen this evening in the study of Psalms chapter 10 and all of our Hebrew word studies this evening as well. These need to have been done without neglecting the others. There is no room for neglecting anything that Yahweh has spoken in his Torah. Oh, get rid of the word weightier matters. I've heard so many, and I know that many of you have as well, have heard so many doctrines and concerning that passage. You take the word that was added out of there and it starts making a lot more sense. They are absolutely saying that there is weight in the Torah, and none of the matters, if we're going to use that word, that terminology, are to be done away with at all. Praise Yah. So, I want to thank the person that sent in the question. I do pray that that has answered your question extensively. Any of you that may be watching on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe there, please. Hit the bell so you'll receive our notifications. You can join us at Facebook. You can also join us at www.yahwehsmessenger.com and Twitter, LinkedIn, and other various social media outlets. You can get a hold of us at our contact information right there. I'm going to be going out of the road in a few weeks, maybe 3 weeks or so. I'm getting all the plans together right now. I'm going to be passing through regions of Washington and Oregon, but I'm going to be baptizing and teaching in Southern California, in Bakersfield and Lancaster. I'm also going to be in Arizona, as well as Missouri, Tennessee, Georgia, Maryland, and Michigan. So if you guys are anywhere in those areas, and I'll be coming back home across the top of the United States through Colorado and all of those places on my way home. So if you're anywhere in those areas and you want me to come baptize somebody in the name of Yahshua, or if you want me to come and teach there, share the Hebrew language, just get a hold of me at the contact information there at the bottom of your screen. And don't forget to join us tomorrow morning for our live Sabbath service, as we're going to be going over the Torah portions for the week. And there is a fascinating group of revelations in our study for tomorrow during live Sabbath. So I want to thank each and every one of you for joining us. Again, join us tomorrow. Join all of our social media platforms. May Yahweh bless each and every one of you, and shalom, shalom.